Damon Reyes was an FBI detective renowned for his expertise in unraveling financial crimes. After concluding an extensive money laundering case that spanned multiple states, he was granted a period of gardening leave, a mandatory break meant to help him decompress from the stress of undercover work. During this hiatus, Damon chose to lie low in Mayfield Glade, a peaceful suburban community he believed would provide the quiet anonymity he needed. While exploring the possibilities for a restful pastime, Damon stumbled upon an unexpected form of therapy, painting the fence surrounding the modest home he was temporarily renting. The fence had seen better days, its dull wooden planks bore chipped paint and weathered edges. Determined to enliven the property, Damon purchased a bold shade of turquoise paint, figuring it would stand out in a neighborhood filled with uniform hues of beige, off-white, and gray. On a sunny morning, he set up his supplies in the front yard, brushes, tarps, and a large bucket of bright paint. Neighbors passed by, some waving politely while others threw curious glances his way. For the most part, Damon kept a low profile, wearing a simple baseball cap and worn-out jeans. He found that the rhythmic strokes of the paintbrush helped settle his mind, allowing him to let go of lingering tension from the high-stakes investigation he'd recently wrapped up. Yet, as he brushed that vivid turquoise onto the splintered wood, Damon couldn't entirely shut out his detective instincts. He noticed small details others might miss, the subdued hush that seemed to cloak Mayfield Glade in the daytime, the immaculate rows of flower beds that looked almost too carefully tended, the occasional nervous glances from a neighbor who paused to watch before hastily moving on. Despite telling himself he was there to rest, part of Damon's mind remained ever vigilant, scanning for anomalies. In casual conversation, the real estate agent who had rented him the property mentioned that Mayfield Glade was known for its strict homeowners association rules. Damon wondered how his flamboyant choice of fence color might be received. He also remembered the discreet inquiries he'd made about the neighborhood's reputation, mostly retirees, young families, and white-collar professionals, hardly the sort of place where one expected trouble. However, Damon's hunches had rarely failed him. There was something about the forced pleasantness of the community that raised a red flag in his seasoned mind. Though he'd promised himself a respite from investigations, he couldn't help but remain attuned to his surroundings. As he carefully applied each coat of paint under the bright afternoon sun, he felt the faintest prickle of unease, as if his presence in Mayfield Glade was destined to ruffle feathers. Little did Damon know that his vibrant fence color would serve as the catalyst for a chain of events that would shake this apparently serene neighborhood to its core. For now, he was content to focus on the slow, steady process of painting, unaware that beneath the calm surface of Mayfield Glade, secrets simmered, waiting to be exposed. Early the following day, Damon Reyes resumed his fence painting project, relishing the mild weather and the chance to keep his hands busy. It wasn't long before one of the neighbors made a beeline for him, Edna Brewster, a tall, sharp-featured woman who seemed to fill the yard with her presence. She wore a pressed blouse and a calculating expression, as though perpetually on patrol for infractions of Mayfield Glade's unwritten rules. Damon paused mid-stroke, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "Good morning," he offered politely, nodding a greeting. Edna, however, didn't return the smile. Instead, she tilted her head at the turquoise paint, her lips tightening in disapproval. "That's quite a color," she remarked. Though her tone was even, Damon detected a pointed edge beneath the surface. "I'm not sure it's in line with the community standards we keep here in Mayfield Glade." He set his brush aside, sensing the tension. "I like it," he replied simply, hoping to diffuse the situation. "It's bright, but it makes me feel relaxed. I figure a little color can't hurt." Edna's brow furrowed, and she glanced around as if to confirm whether other passers-by shared her disapproval. "Interesting perspective," she said coolly. "I'm curious, how long have you lived here? I don't believe I've seen you around before." Damon hesitated, remembering he was supposed to maintain a low profile. "I'm renting this place for a while," he answered, keeping his voice casual. "Needed a change of scenery." She arched an eyebrow, taking in his worn jeans, paint-speckled boots, and baseball cap pulled low. "Where are you from originally?" she pressed, her scrutiny intensifying. Damon tried not to roll his eyes. Part of him wanted to flash his FBI credentials just to watch her reaction, but he knew better than to tip his hand. "From out of state," he said, offering no further details. Edna studied him closely, and Damon could almost see the gears turning in her head. He suspected that any newcomer, a stranger, probably raised alarm bells for someone as territorial as Edna Brewster. She cleared her throat. "Well, we take pride in Mayfield Glade's uniform aesthetic," she continued, gesturing to the pastel hues of the surrounding houses. "I wouldn't want you to make too many modifications without consulting the Homeowners Association guidelines." Damon recognized a veiled threat when he heard one. "I'll be mindful," he replied, intentionally measured. "But as far as I know, there aren't any official prohibitions against bright fence colors, right?" Edna's lips thinned. "There is a formal process to approve significant changes," she insisted. "I'll have to verify whether your fence color requires a permit or at least a committee review." Though her words were cloaked in polite formality, Damon grasped that she was suspicious of him. More than that, she seemed almost affronted by his presence. He watched as Edna's eyes flicked over his features, perhaps noting his background or the subtle clues that marked him as an outsider. "What do you think? Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, like, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more shocking stories like this." Drawing a breath to steady himself, Damon decided to keep things cordial. "I appreciate the clarification," he said, turning back to his painting. "I'll wait to hear from the HOA if there's an issue." Edna lingered, as if expecting an argument. When none came, she sniffed disdainfully and spun on her heel, disappearing down the sidewalk. Damon sighed, realizing that his biggest challenge in Mayfield Glade might not be enjoying some time off, it could be dealing with a neighbor who already viewed him as an unwelcome anomaly. Damon Reyes was halfway through applying a second coat of the turquoise paint when he heard a distant ringing from across the street. Glancing up, he recognized Edna Brewster standing on her porch, phone pressed to her ear, her sharp gaze locked onto him. He couldn't hear her words clearly, but her agitated gesture suggested something serious, or at least, that's how she wanted it to appear. Moments later, Damon heard the unmistakable sound of sirens wailing in the distance. At first, he assumed they would race past the community, heading toward a highway or another neighborhood in need. But as the sirens grew louder, his gut twisted with an uneasy realization: they were coming here. With a final stroke of the brush, he set the paint can aside and waited. Sure enough, a patrol car turned onto his street. Neighbors poked their heads out of windows, and a few stepped onto their lawns to witness whatever spectacle was unfolding. Damon frowned, suspecting Edna might have called the police on him. Perhaps she wanted to claim that painting a fence in bright colors amounted to vandalism or some bizarre breach of the peace. Stepping out of his yard, he waved courteously as the officer pulled up and parked at the curb. The car door opened, and out stepped Officer Bradley, a middle-aged patrolman with a stern countenance. Bradley surveyed the scene, then slowly approached Damon, casting a wary glance at the bucket of paint. "Afternoon, sir," Bradley said, his voice level. "I got a call about suspicious activity. Someone reported you were acting strangely in this neighborhood." Damon suppressed a groan. Of course Edna framed it as suspicious. "Good afternoon, officer. My name's Damon Reyes," he replied, extending a friendly hand. "I'm just renting this place for a while, painting the fence. I'm not sure what's so suspicious about that." Bradley didn't immediately shake his hand. Instead, he studied Damon's face with a practiced policeman's eye. "Mind if I ask what you're doing here in Mayfield Glade?" he inquired, not unkindly but clearly intending to probe. Damon nodded in understanding. If he wanted to defuse the situation, he had to remain polite. "Like I said, I'm renting for a short term," he explained. "Taking a break from my usual routine, trying to relax. Decided to fix up the fence because it looked pretty bad." Officer Bradley scanned the front of the house, the fence, and finally returned his attention to Damon. "Well, the caller, Ms. Brewster, I believe, claimed you were being evasive, that you didn't belong in this area. She mentioned something about the color of the fence, too. Damon fought the urge to roll his eyes. I can't help the color. I just liked it. It's not illegal to paint a fence turquoise, right? Bradley allowed a thin smile, albeit a guarded one. No, sir, it isn't. But Ms. Brewster had other concerns, something about you loitering, possibly scouting out properties. She also mentioned your race, implying you were out of place. The officer paused, looking a bit uncomfortable. I need to verify there's no real issue here. Exhaling, Damon weighed the pros and cons of revealing his FBI background. Though his official reason for being on leave was to rest, he also had the authority to show his identification if it would clear up potential misunderstandings. However, brandishing that badge could draw more attention than he wanted. Instead, he opted for a more straightforward approach. I understand you're doing your job, he said calmly. I can show you my rental agreement if you like. It's inside the house. Officer Bradley hesitated, then nodded. Sure, let's take a look. Leading the way, Damon guided him through the front door. The house was sparsely furnished, just a couch, a coffee table, and a few boxes. Damon retrieved the lease paperwork from a small desk. As Bradley examined it, his expression softened somewhat. Everything seems legitimate, he murmured. You have a valid reason to be here. They walked back outside, where the small crowd of curious neighbors had grown. Edna Brewster stood among them, arms folded across her chest, lips pursed in disapproval. Damon locked eyes with her momentarily, noticing her self-satisfied posture. Officer Bradley cleared his throat. Ms. Brewster, he called, prompting Edna to approach. I've verified Mr. Reyes's documentation. He's legally renting the property. There doesn't appear to be any criminal activity. Edna huffed, face flushing. But that color. It's practically offensive. And how do you know he's not lying about something else? Bradley's brow knitted. Ma'am, painting a fence an unusual color isn't against the law. If you have concerns about HOA guidelines, that's a civil matter, not a police matter. Outraged, Edna sputtered. He's not from here. He's making a mockery of our neighborhood. He must be up to something. Folding his arms over his chest, Bradley exchanged a glance with Damon. Ms. Brewster, unless you have actual evidence of wrongdoing, there's nothing more I can do. I suggest you talk to the HOA if the paint color bothers you. Unable to contain her frustration, Edna let out a sound that was half grunt, half exasperated sigh. She stormed back toward her house, while the onlooking neighbors slowly dispersed, murmuring among themselves. Officer Bradley shrugged apologetically at Damon. Sorry for the trouble, Mr. Reyes, he said quietly. Some folks are just wary of outsiders. Damon nodded, watching Edna vanish behind her door. No worries, officer. I appreciate your professionalism. As Bradley pulled away in his patrol car, Damon resumed his painting with a slight tremor of unease. Though his run-in with the law had been resolved calmly, he couldn't shake the feeling that Edna's hostility ran deeper than petty issues of color coordination. A false alarm, perhaps, but one that hinted at the undercurrents of tension in Mayfield Glade, suggesting this was only the beginning of a far more complicated ordeal. The next morning, Damon Reyes stepped onto his porch, still feeling a lingering tension from his encounter with the police. He tried to dismiss it as a momentary inconvenience. After all, Officer Bradley had found no wrongdoing. Yet, Damon's instincts told him to stay alert. As an experienced investigator, he knew how quickly small conflicts could escalate into bigger problems. He was in the midst of a quiet breakfast, a simple cup of coffee and toast, when he heard another commotion outside. Pushing aside the curtain, he spotted Edna Brewster again, her posture stiff as she stood on the sidewalk. This time, she was gesturing animatedly at a man in a uniform. Damon's initial thought was that it might be another police officer, but as he leaned closer, he noticed the uniform was different, dark blue with a distinct patch on the sleeve. It was Officer Bradley's partner, Sergeant Whitfield, who had arrived on the scene. Cautiously, Damon stepped out onto his porch, arms crossed casually over his chest. He didn't want to appear confrontational, but he also wasn't about to shy away from whatever was unfolding. Edna's strident voice carried across the lawn. "I'm telling you, Sergeant, he's not who he claims to be. You people need to check his credentials more thoroughly." Damon's brow furrowed. She was accusing him of deception, perhaps suspecting he had shown forged documents. He carefully approached the pair, nodding a greeting to the sergeant. "Morning," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. Sergeant Whitfield gave Damon a wary once-over. "Morning. Ms. Brewster here insists that your rental papers might be fake and that you're impersonating someone. Why, exactly?" Edna gave a triumphant little smirk. "I had a colleague of mine in real estate check the listing for this property. She couldn't find any record of a rental agreement under your name. You see, Sergeant, he's been lying this whole time." Damon felt annoyance flicker within him. He'd used an alias on the official lease, part of the FBI's protocol for officers taking certain kinds of leave. It was an arrangement approved by his superiors to maintain his anonymity. Realizing that explaining the alias without revealing his occupation would be tricky, he chose to reveal a portion of the truth, enough to defuse the immediate crisis. Reaching into his wallet, he carefully took out his FBI identification. With a resigned sigh, he showed it to Sergeant Whitfield. "Damon Reyes, FBI Special Agent. I'm on an approved leave but renting under a separate name for personal reasons," he said quietly. "If you'd like to verify my credentials, feel free to call the bureau." Both Edna and Sergeant Whitfield stared, momentarily stunned. Edna's eyes widened in disbelief before narrowing in suspicion. "FBI?" she practically hissed. "What business do you have here? Why would you be staying in Mayfield Glade?" Sergeant Whitfield held up a hand for calm. "Give me a moment," he said, taking Damon's badge and stepping aside to make a phone call. Damon stood silently, waiting. Though revealing his badge risked drawing more attention than he wanted, he preferred openness over letting Edna spin the narrative. It wouldn't take long for the local police station to confirm that Damon Reyes was indeed an FBI agent in good standing. Edna's gaze darted from Damon to the sergeant, fury etched across her features. "If you're really FBI, what are you investigating, Mr. Reyes?" she demanded, refusing to drop the confrontation. "We keep a clean neighborhood here. No reason for the likes of you to come snooping around." Damon's jaw tightened. "I'm not investigating anything," he replied evenly. "At least not until you started creating these incidents. I'm on leave to relax, not to run surveillance." He paused, but a flicker of caution sparked in his mind. Ever since arriving, he had sensed a certain unease behind Mayfield Glade's manicured facades. Perhaps Edna's overreaction stemmed from more than just prejudice. Sergeant Whitfield returned, handing the badge back to Damon with an apologetic nod. "Confirmed. The bureau says you're who you claim to be," he stated. Then he faced Edna, who looked ready to burst with indignation. "Ma'am, I've verified this man's identification. He's not breaking any law by painting his fence, nor by using an approved alias for a personal lease." "That's impossible," Edna snapped. "He must have forged those documents. Or maybe you're just not looking hard enough." She glowered at Damon as though he was personally responsible for undermining her authority. Whitfield gave Damon a sympathetic shrug, then squared his shoulders to address Edna. "Ms. Brewster, unless you have actual evidence of a crime, I can't detain him. If you continue to make false or misleading reports, we may have grounds to charge you with misusing police resources." For a moment, Edna looked rattled. Damon couldn't help but wonder if her aggression was fueled by something else, perhaps fear of being caught in wrongdoing. He briefly entertained the thought that she was involved in illicit activity and viewed him as a threat, but it could also be mere hostility toward an outsider. Regardless, the dynamic was clear: Edna's attempts to discredit him were escalating, and his status as an FBI agent had only heightened her paranoia. As Sergeant Whitfield walked away, Edna huffed once more and stalked off toward her house, radiating resentment. Damon watched her retreat, unsettled by the intensity of her reaction. The confrontation had ended, but it left him with more questions than answers. Why was Edna so desperate to expose him as a fraud? What secrets did she fear he might uncover? Though he had initially planned to enjoy a peaceful break, Damon found himself increasingly drawn into the mystery of Mayfield Glade. If there was more hidden behind the pristine lawns and carefully painted shutters, he was determined to find out, even if it meant cutting his vacation short and stepping back into the role of an active FBI agent. As the day wore on, Damon Reyes sensed that the tension unleashed by Edna Brewster was far from over. Although Sergeant Whitfield had confirmed Damon's status as an FBI agent, it seemed to do little to dissuade Edna from her crusade. Each time Damon peered out his window, he noticed her pacing in her front yard or glaring in his direction, as if daring him to make a move she could pounce on. Near late afternoon, he decided to take a short walk around Mayfield Glade, both to clear his head and to discreetly observe the neighborhood. The street was lined with neatly trimmed hedges, pastel-colored homes, and occasional lawn ornaments that gave the area a wholesome appearance. Yet a few subtle things felt off. Some houses had curtains drawn tight in the middle of the day, certain neighbors hurried inside when Damon strolled past, as though avoiding interaction. Perhaps it was merely the fallout from the recent commotion, or maybe there was something more pervasive at play. Still, he tried to remind himself he was on leave. He had no official reason to suspect wrongdoing, except for Edna's bizarre hostility, which could stem from a variety of motives. Finishing his walk, Damon returned home to find a surprise waiting on his doorstep, a folded piece of paper tucked under a small rock. He picked it up and read the typed message, his brow creasing, "We don't want strangers causing trouble. Pack up your paint and leave our community as you found it." No signature, no direct threat, but the implication was clear enough. Damon frowned, pocketing the note. He didn't want to overreact, but the anonymous message suggested that Edna wasn't the only one who viewed him as an intruder. Or perhaps she had simply recruited others in her vendetta. Either way, Damon felt his instincts stirring. If he faced more open hostility, he would have to take steps to protect himself. His phone buzzed just then, a call from Officer Bradley. "Reyes here," Damon answered, stepping inside the house. "Mr. Reyes, sorry to bother you again," Bradley began, sounding uncomfortable. "I've got Ms. Brewster here at the station. She's demanding we arrest you for impersonating an FBI agent. We've already verified your credentials, but she won't let it go. She insists we open an investigation or let her file charges." Damon pinched the bridge of his nose. "That's ridiculous," he muttered. "You verified I'm legit." "I know." Sergeant Whitfield confirmed everything. "But she's being persistent. We told her if she can't provide new evidence, there's nothing we can do. I just wanted to give you a heads up, in case she tries something else." Damon thanked him, ending the call with a tight sense of frustration. He was no stranger to dealing with obstinate individuals, but Edna's fixation was bordering on obsession. His experiences in law enforcement taught him that sometimes the loudest accusers were themselves hiding something. The question was, what? Shortly before dusk, Damon sat on his porch swing, gazing at the sky's changing colors, when he spotted Edna approaching his fence once more. Instead of confronting her, he waited silently as she lingered by the curb. She looked around to ensure no one else was watching, then called out, "Agent Reyes, or whoever you are, step outside. We need to talk." Curiosity piqued, Damon stood and walked to the fence line, maintaining a respectful distance. "What's on your mind, Ms. Brewster?" he asked, tone guarded. She pursed her lips. "Don't think for a second I'm buying your story. If you were truly FBI, you wouldn't be wasting time painting fences. You'd be out chasing real criminals. So, what are you really doing here? Are you after me?" Her question caught Damon off guard. "Why would I be after you?" he countered. "You're the one who keeps hounding me. If I wanted to investigate you, I'd do it quietly, not paint my fence in broad daylight. Edna flushed. Don't get smart. I know your type. You swoop in, claim to be on the right side of the law, but you'll use your power to harass anyone who doesn't fall in line. Damon raised his eyebrows. I'm on leave. I haven't done anything to you, aside from painting my fence. You're the one making unfounded accusations. She shook her head as though refusing to accept his words. For a moment, Damon thought she might reveal something deeper, perhaps slip up and confirm a secret fear. But she simply glowered and spat, "Stay away from my house. Stay away from my affairs. If you so much as set foot near my property, I'll have you arrested, FBI or not." With that, she spun on her heel and stormed off. Damon remained by the fence, watching her go. His suspicions flared anew. What could Edna Brewster be so desperate to protect that she'd risk making a fool of herself at the police station, or distributing anonymous notes? A part of him wanted to dismiss her as an overzealous neighbor who loathed change. But the detective in him sensed a bigger picture, a puzzle he didn't yet have all the pieces for. Edna's vehement outbursts hinted at more than mere prejudice or stubbornness. Could her behavior be tied to some illicit scheme hidden behind Mayfield Glade's pristine facade? Damon sighed, stepping back inside his house. So much for his restful sabbatical. Whether or not he wanted to get involved, events were unfolding in a way that made it nearly impossible for him to remain a passive observer. If Edna was truly guarding a secret, Damon was determined to uncover it, if only to keep her from escalating the situation further. Night settled over Mayfield Glade with a tranquil quiet that belied the tension simmering just below the surface. Damon Reyes, unable to sleep, paced inside the rented house, replaying the day's events in his mind. Something about Edna Brewster's frantic hostility gnawed at him, making him question whether she was acting alone or on behalf of a larger concern. He decided it was time to do what came naturally, investigate. He began by examining the note he'd received earlier: "We don't want strangers causing trouble. Pack up your paint and leave our community as you found it." He ran his fingertips over the neatly typed words, noticing no smudges or unique identifiers. It had been printed on standard computer paper, a common font, nothing that would easily trace back to anyone in particular. Still, its abrupt, menacing tone suggested urgency, as though the sender feared Damon's continued presence might expose something. Tucking the note into a folder, Damon settled at his temporary workstation, an old wooden desk he dragged into the living room. His laptop hummed quietly as he conducted a cursory online search about Mayfield Glade, property records, local news stories, and the Homeowners Association's official website. On the surface, everything appeared normal. The association boasted well-maintained parks, community events, and the sort of minutiae that appealed to families seeking a calm lifestyle. Yet no matter how thoroughly he read, he found no immediate clues pointing to illicit activities. Next, he turned his attention to social media. Many communities had neighborhood groups, which could be hotbeds of gossip or leads. Sure enough, Mayfield Glade had a private group page. Damon, using a secondary account set up for undercover work, requested to join. After a brief wait, he was granted access, most likely because the moderators recognized his temporary address from the membership questions. Scanning the posts, he found an array of typical neighborhood chatter: lost pets, recommendations for gardeners, and mild complaints about noise or parking violations. Yet, as he scrolled further, he noticed a handful of cryptic comments that hinted at odd financial matters. Someone posted vaguely about receiving strange offers to buy their house for cash at below market value. Another complained about an unusually high number of vacant properties in the area, questioning what the HOA planned to do. The responses were lukewarm, with some members suggesting it was a real estate investor's attempt to flip houses. Damon couldn't be sure these incidents connected to Edna's behavior, but they piqued his interest. Around midnight, he decided to step outside for some fresh air. The crisp night breeze offered a momentary respite from his swirling thoughts. Across the street, a dimly lit window caught his eye: Edna's living room. Though the curtains were partially closed, Damon could see the silhouette of someone pacing back and forth. It appeared he wasn't the only one unsettled by the day's events. Quietly returning indoors, he resolved to dig deeper. His training taught him that suspicious financial patterns often signaled bigger crimes, such as fraud or money laundering. Even if Mayfield Glade had a veneer of respectability, unsavory dealings could lurk beneath that polished exterior. The next morning, Damon woke early, still determined to keep his official identity low-key. He donned casual clothes and took a drive around the neighborhood, keen to spot anything out of the ordinary. Within a few blocks, he noticed something odd, a series of recently sold houses that now sat vacant. The "for sale" signs were gone, replaced by darkened windows and empty driveways. In a thriving suburb like Mayfield Glade, that many vacant homes seemed unusual. At one property, he saw a black SUV parked out front, engine running. As he passed, the driver, a stern-looking man in a crisp shirt, glanced at Damon with evident suspicion. Damon offered a friendly nod, but the man quickly looked away, pulling out of the driveway and leaving the house as it was, door locked and all lights off. Intrigued, Damon jotted down the SUV's license plate number. He wasn't certain if there was any wrongdoing involved, but such a guarded stance from someone in an otherwise quiet neighborhood struck him as odd. Perhaps it was an investor. Perhaps it was someone else entirely. After returning home, Damon spent a few hours cross-referencing the vacant properties with public records. Sure enough, each had changed hands in rapid succession, sometimes multiple times within a year. That was a common trick in money laundering, cycling homes through shell companies or compliant individuals. Still, it was hardly proof of a crime. He needed more concrete evidence to officially call in the FBI. His phone buzzed. The caller ID read private, which often meant a blocked or restricted number. Damon answered tentatively. A low voice crackled on the line, "Agent Reyes, you don't want to meddle in things you can't handle. This neighborhood is none of your concern. Stop snooping, or you'll regret it." The call ended abruptly, leaving Damon holding a dead line. Adrenaline surged through him. So it wasn't just Edna who saw him as a threat, there were others keenly aware of his investigative background. They'd presumably discovered his real identity, either through Edna or another means. Regardless, the message was clear: if Damon continued digging into Mayfield Glade's affairs, he'd be stepping into a hornet's nest. He stared at his phone, the dial tone echoing in his ears. This was no ordinary dispute over fence color or an overbearing neighbor's prejudices. Larger forces were at play, and they were anxious enough to intimidate him directly. Damon had never been one to back down from a challenge. If he stayed quiet now, Mayfield Glade's inhabitants, innocent neighbors included, could be at risk from whatever network lurked beneath the surface. Setting his phone aside, Damon steeled himself. His gardening leave would have to take a back seat. Protecting people from criminal elements was in his DNA. He would proceed carefully, gather evidence, and only then bring it to his superiors if necessary. The puzzle pieces were falling into place, he just hoped he could solve it before anyone, including himself, got hurt. The phone call warning Damon Reyes to cease his inquiries weighed heavily on his mind. He decided the time had come to involve someone he could trust, someone outside the local police force, whose members might be compromised or under scrutiny. That someone was Isabel Dominguez, his longtime partner at the FBI, known for her formidable investigative skills and discretion. Damon sat at his makeshift desk, tapping Isabel's number into his phone. She answered on the second ring. "You're supposed to be on leave," she said by way of greeting, her tone half concerned and half amused. He managed a dry chuckle. "I know, Isa. But I need you to do me a favor. I'm in this suburban neighborhood called Mayfield Glade. Something odd is going on. Properties cycling ownership, possible intimidation, and a neighbor hellbent on exposing me as FBI. It's too strange to ignore." Isabel's reply was immediate. "Send me everything you've got. Addresses, license plate numbers, property records, all of it. I'll see if it pings any of our databases for known laundering operations or organized crime fronts. Relief coursed through Damon. If anyone could piece together a mosaic of potential wrongdoing from scattered clues, it was Isabel. "Thank you," he said. "I'll email you the details as soon as we hang up." "Be careful," she warned. "If they know you're FBI and they're threatening you, they won't hesitate to escalate." Once he ended the call, Damon meticulously organized the data on his laptop, attaching files to an encrypted email for Isabel. He included specifics about Edna Brewster's erratic behavior, the mysterious black SUV, and the vacant properties with suspicious purchase histories. While Damon typed up his summary, a flicker of guilt nagged at him. He was technically violating the spirit of his leave by engaging in an unofficial investigation. But he reassured himself that safeguarding the public fell under his broader duty as a federal agent. By late afternoon, Isabel responded with preliminary findings. Over the phone, her voice had turned serious. "There's definitely a pattern. Some of those LLCs that purchase the houses have ties to bigger fish. I found references to a shell corporation that's popped up in investigations related to money laundering on the West Coast. The same entity recently acquired properties here in your area. If this is connected, it's bigger than just a few shady deals." Damon exhaled, bridging the gap between suspicion and confirmation. "That makes sense. Maybe the higher-ups in the neighborhood stand to profit from flipping properties under the table." Isabel hummed thoughtfully. "Could be. They might also be using the real estate transactions to clean illicit funds. In any case, I suggest caution. Don't blow your cover if you can avoid it. We don't know how far the corruption spreads." Ending the call, Damon felt a surge of determination. Despite Edna's hostility, a more insidious network lurked beneath Mayfield Glade's suburban veneer. He wondered whether Edna was part of that network or merely a pawn being manipulated. The next step was gathering more concrete proof, surveillance, maybe even infiltration if it became necessary. Over the next few days, Damon set up a low-level stakeout from his living room. Nothing fancy, just a camera positioned behind the blinds, capturing footage of the street. Each evening, he reviewed the recordings, noting which cars came and went, which neighbors met discreetly on the sidewalk for hushed conversations. Most folks stuck to their normal routines, walking dogs, mowing lawns, or chatting near mailboxes. But occasionally, Damon caught glimpses of the black SUV he'd seen before, often idling in front of unoccupied properties before disappearing. In the meantime, Edna Brewster persisted in her public crusade to label Damon as a threat. She cornered neighbors, whispering about his alleged fake credentials. Some listened with worried expressions, others appeared unimpressed, likely dismissing her claims as paranoia. Still, Damon could feel the neighborhood collectively tensing each time he strolled past. Whispers and pointed stares dogged him. Adding to his suspicions was the appearance of another key figure, Lewis Hemming, president of the Homeowners Association. Damon spotted him entering Edna's house one afternoon, staying there for nearly an hour before leaving with a folder tucked under his arm. The sight made Damon's pulse quicken. If the HOA president and Edna were meeting privately, there might be more to Mayfield Glade's criminal underbelly than a few suspicious property deals. That night, Damon updated Isabel on the new developments. She asked pointed questions. "Hemming has a background in real estate, right? He's likely controlling the property side of things, meaning he could facilitate hush-hush sales or quick flips. Edna might just be the neighborhood watchdog, making sure nobody snoops around." "That's my read on it," Damon agreed. "I want to confirm their involvement, but I can't blow my cover prematurely. If I confront them outright, I'll lose any chance of tracing the flow of money back to the bigger network." Isabel's voice carried a note of approval. "Smart. Keep me posted. I'll keep digging on my end. If we can link Hemming or Edna to known laundering affiliates, we can request official authorization for a sting or a raid." Hanging up, Damon felt the weight of responsibility settle squarely on his shoulders. While he wanted to maintain a low profile, each new revelation in Mayfield Glade spurred him onward. Innocent families here could be inadvertently part of a criminal scheme, and he couldn't stand by while money launderers used suburban homes as financial chess pieces. He decided to plan his next move carefully, perhaps discreetly approach some of the neighbors who seemed troubled by the vacant properties or suspicious house purchases. If he could gather enough first-hand accounts, he'd have leverage to turn the tables on the operation. In the meantime, he would remain vigilant, mindful that someone might be watching him just as he watched them. As the night wore on, Damon mulled over the swirling puzzle pieces, Edna's intimidation tactics, the black SUV's prowling, and Lewis Hemming's clandestine visits. The deeper he delved, the more he realized that a simple suburban veneer could hide a labyrinth of deceit. Whether Edna was the orchestrator or simply a cog in the machine mattered less now. What mattered was following the trail to its conclusion and ensuring that Mayfield Glade's unsuspecting residents wouldn't become collateral damage in a criminal operation's pursuit of profit. After days of discreet surveillance, Damon Reyes felt he had enough circumstantial evidence to act. It wasn't a complete picture. He needed tangible proof that Lewis Hemming and possibly Edna Brewster were facilitating money laundering in Mayfield Glade. But the patterns of real estate transactions, the black SUV's repeated visits to vacant properties, and Edna's hypervigilant harassment all pointed to a sinister plot. Late one evening, Damon decided to watch Hemming's house more closely. It was larger than most in the neighborhood, boasting manicured hedges and an ornate front porch that screamed affluence. Parking his own vehicle out of sight, Damon used a pair of binoculars to keep tabs from a safe distance. The night was quiet, with only the chirping of insects breaking the stillness. Around 10 p.m., a set of headlights approached Hemming's driveway. Damon tensed, zooming in to see the occupant. As the car door opened, out stepped Edna Brewster, carrying the same folder Damon had seen her with earlier. She glanced around before heading inside, moving quickly like she didn't want to be spotted. Damon's heart thudded in his chest. If Edna and Hemming were meeting in secret this late, they might be finalizing illegal deals or orchestrating new property flips. Carefully, he inched closer, using the shadows of the street to mask his presence. He located a narrow gap between two houses offering a partial view of Hemming's living room window. From there, he saw silhouettes moving about, setting papers on a table. Though he couldn't hear their conversation, their animated gestures indicated an intense discussion. Eager to capture evidence, Damon pulled out his phone. He snapped a few photos of their silhouettes through the window. The images weren't crystal clear, but they showed both individuals handling what looked like documents. If he could match those to known real estate forms or money transfer receipts, it might strengthen his case. Suddenly, Hemming's front door opened. Damon ducked behind a hedge as Edna emerged, folder clutched tightly. She headed for her vehicle, a tense expression on her face. Curious, Damon shifted position to record her license plate number. Just as he zoomed in, a light from across the street turned on, and he realized another neighbor was up late, possibly catching sight of him. The last thing he needed was someone calling the cops on a peeping Tom. Quietly, he retreated to his own car, heart hammering. Once back home, Damon forwarded the new photos to Isabel Dominguez. Within minutes, she called him, excitement tinging her words. "This could be the breakthrough we need," she said. "I'll run a check on Edna's background. If she's connected to any known laundering associates, that folder might be the final link." Over the next few days, the pieces began to align. Isabel discovered that Edna had previously worked for a small real estate firm that dissolved under suspicious circumstances. Several high-value homes were transferred through that firm in quick succession, classic signs of laundering. Meanwhile, Hemming had a public record as an investor in local properties, though the details of his holdings were murky at best. As the evidence mounted, Damon's instincts sharpened. He suspected that Hemming and Edna were funneling illicit funds through the rapid turnover of properties in Mayfield Glade. Their scheme likely involved forging documents, strong-arming reluctant sellers, and using intimidation, like the warnings Damon received, to keep inquisitive neighbors silent. Indeed, Edna's initial hostility and continued fixation on Damon's identity now seemed less about prejudice and more about protecting the operation. Despite the growing proof, Damon knew he needed a decisive move to take them down. He contacted Officer Bradley, who had been sympathetic earlier. "I can't share all the classified details," Damon told him, "but let's just say there's reason to believe Mr. Hemming and Ms. Brewster are involved in something big. If I provide you with enough probable cause, could you coordinate with the FBI for a sting operation?" Bradley was cautious. "I'll need real evidence to get a warrant. But if you're willing to testify about what you've seen, and if the Bureau backs you, we can make this happen." Damon agreed, planning to consolidate his findings with Isabel's research. They'd approached the local authorities with a complete case file, leaving no room for Hemming or Edna to slip through legal loopholes. It would be risky. If they caught wind of the plan, they might destroy evidence or vanish. The final domino fell when Damon received a tip from an unexpected source, an elderly neighbor named Martha Claiborne, who had overheard Edna boasting about a big payout after forcing a longtime homeowner to sell below market value. Martha seemed distressed, explaining that the elderly resident was essentially bullied into leaving the neighborhood. "She's a widow," Martha told Damon in a trembling voice. She had no one to stand up for her. That was enough for Damon. He compiled all the evidence, property records, suspicious call logs, pictures of Edna and Hemming meeting, and testimonies from neighbors. With Isabel's help, he prepared an airtight packet of information for the FBI's local field office. They arranged a meeting, during which Damon outlined the entire scheme, naming Edna Brewster and Louis Hemming as central figures. The FBI agreed to mobilize quickly, working with Officer Bradley's precinct to plan a coordinated raid. Damon felt a swirl of emotions, anger at seeing vulnerable people exploited, pride in doing his duty, and unease about how Edna would react. Yet he pushed forward, resolved to expose the truth hidden within Mayfield Glade. On the eve of the operation, Damon gazed at his half-finished turquoise fence, reflecting on the bizarre twist of fate that had turned a simple paint job into a high-stakes investigation. He had arrived looking for peace, only to uncover a web of corruption. Now, standing on the threshold of action, he steeled himself for the final confrontation. One way or another, Edna Brewster and Louis Hemming would be held accountable for their crimes. Before dawn broke over the neatly trimmed lawns of Mayfield Glade, a silent convoy of unmarked cars converged at a nearby parking lot. Damon Reyes, dressed once more in his FBI windbreaker, felt a swell of anticipation as he joined the assembled agents. Officer Bradley and a small contingent from the local police department were also present, ready to coordinate their efforts. The plan was straightforward. Teams would simultaneously execute search warrants on Louis Hemming's residence and Edna Brewster's home, seizing any incriminating files or electronic records. Shortly after 6 a.m, the operation began. Damon rode with Isabel Dominguez, who had flown in overnight to supervise the raid in person. They approached Hemming's house first. Lights flickered on inside, someone was awake. At Damon's signal, a team of agents burst through the front door, announcing themselves as FBI. Confusion and shouts erupted, but within minutes, Hemming was in handcuffs, his protests drowned out by the clamor of law enforcement searching the premises. Meanwhile, Officer Bradley's team swept into Edna Brewster's home. Despite her vehement denials, they found reams of paperwork matching the suspicious property transactions Damon had documented. Edna shrieked about her privacy being violated, claiming she was merely an upstanding citizen. Yet the evidence told a different story: forged signatures, hidden financial ledgers, and even a flowchart outlining property flips that no legitimate business would condone. Damon and Isabel regrouped outside Hemming's house once the scene was secured. Satisfied they had gathered the core evidence, a trove of digital files on a laptop plus incriminating emails, Damon breathed a sigh of relief. The pieces that had lingered as rumors and hunches were now indisputable facts. Investigators would be able to track the shady transactions all the way to their source, dealing a decisive blow to the laundering network. Word came through the police radio that Edna had been arrested and taken away in the back of a squad car. She continued protesting, loudly insisting that Damon was the real criminal. Nobody paid her much mind. The jig was up. Edna Brewster and Lewis Hemming had orchestrated a sophisticated scheme, and now they faced federal charges that would almost certainly lead to prison time. By mid-morning, the neighborhood buzzed with activity. Residents peeked out from behind curtains or gathered on sidewalks, anxious for an explanation. Damon, stepping away from the chaotic scene, felt both triumph and exhaustion. He'd come to Mayfield Glade for respite, only to uncover a crime ring hidden behind manicured facades. In spite of everything, he was proud to have protected innocent homeowners from further exploitation. The morning after the raid, Mayfield Glade found itself uncharacteristically calm. Law enforcement vehicles were gone, and the usual suburban stillness settled back over the winding streets. Edna Brewster and Lewis Hemming were in custody, awaiting formal charges that ranged from wire fraud to money laundering. Word spread rapidly through the neighborhood, as astonished residents tried to reconcile the friendly, clean-cut image of Hemming with the criminal mastermind now revealed. Damon Reyes stood in front of his half-painted turquoise fence, a paintbrush in hand. The smell of fresh paint mingled with the scent of dewy grass under the warm morning sun. This project, once an attempt to decompress, had inadvertently sparked the chain of events leading to the takedown of a criminal network. As Damon resumed his painting, a few neighbors passed by, offering waves and sheepish smiles. One even mustered the courage to thank him. Apparently, rumors of his FBI status had circulated, but the gratitude in their eyes suggested they finally understood his role in protecting their community. He finished the last plank just as Isabel Dominguez pulled up in a sedan. She stepped out, her expression a mix of relief and amusement at seeing Damon with a paint-splattered shirt. "You really can't take a vacation without stumbling onto a case, can you?" she teased, leaning against the car door. Damon chuckled, setting the brush aside. "Guess not," he admitted. "But at least we put a stop to that racket. People here won't lose their homes to shady dealings anymore." Isabel nodded in agreement. "The Bureau's already tracing the network beyond Mayfield Glade. Seems like Hemming and Brewster were part of a much larger operation. If it wasn't for your fence, we might never have known." They shared a quiet moment, reflecting on the improbable twist that began with a simple paint job. Damon felt a twinge of satisfaction, knowing that despite being on leave, he'd once again served the greater good. The subdued applause of the local residents, who now viewed him as a kind of neighborhood hero, was an unexpected bonus. After Isabel departed, Damon took a final stroll around the block. Children played on tidy lawns, and a gentle breeze carried the promise of a more peaceful future for Mayfield Glade. The stares and whispers that once surrounded him had been replaced by nods of respect or friendly good mornings. While the community would undoubtedly bear the scars of deception, it also seemed poised to heal. Returning to his freshly painted fence, Damon packed up his materials. He felt a deep sense of closure. His gardening leave had morphed into an undercover mission, one he hadn't anticipated but couldn't have ignored. As he locked the front door and headed inside, Damon Reyes allowed himself a small smile, reflecting on how an unlikely stroke of color had uncovered a hidden conspiracy, and, in the end, helped make a quiet suburb just a bit safer. Hey everyone! If you found this story powerful and meaningful, please show your support by hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, ringing the bell to never miss our thought-provoking content. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that inspire, educate, and challenge perspectives. Thank you for being part of this journey.